I love it.
That's a weird kind of fun.
Yeah, that's the very like masochistic, like type 3 kind of fun.
I like to hurt. Halloween, that's fun.
Hey, Matt, are you coming to the group run? You gonna be around?
I will be there. I may run a little bit before and then just meet you guys up there.
Nice, man. Awesome. Excited to see you.
Yeah, it'll be really fun. It was so much fun last time.
Yeah.
Was that also
The
like
weather-
the first social thing I did in like a year last time?
Yeah, the weather looks a little bit more cooperative this year, which is nice. Supposed to be really hot.
I feel like
actually.
the universe feels just a bit more stable because I remember last year, like by the time we got to Denver, like that was the day the governor was like, or the mayor of Denver was like, yeah, we're going back into like more intense restrictions. I was like, oh shoot.
And
like-
fire started that day.
Yeah.
That
like
was nuts.
pandemic, fires, winter weather warning. We had it all. Living in Colorado is never boring. And there's dog hairs in everything we own.
Well, should we get started on some of these questions?
Let's do it.
Cool. Where's my easy warm-up question? Oh, perfect. Great question. Thank you. Does a Theragun help with recovery? We have actually talked about this in the recovery call. If you guys want to go into greater depth on it on your own time, definitely recommend we talk about several different recovery tools, but does a Theragun help with recovery? Potentially, it could.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the trouble with answering this question comes from recovery is not one thing, right? It's a set of symptoms, or like it's a set of biomarkers that measured how close you've gotten back to baseline. So a Theragun can help with something like, I mean, there's some limited evidence to suggest it can help with soreness and mobility. But it's not going to like lower your HRV. It's not going to replenish your glycogen stores. It's not going to do some of the most important things that I would say are indicative of good recovery. So like you should do it in conjunction with great sleep, great rest, excellent nutrition, but like you can't use it as, you can't like eat like crap, sleep like crap, and then gun yourself for 5 minutes and say, I'm recovered.
Yeah. And it's the same with the foam roller. I mean, really.
And squeezy pants.
Yeah. I mean, these things are nice, right? Like they get us, they help us build awareness around what parts of our body are sore and need attention. They, give us an opportunity to like put other things aside, like work and whatnot, that can often inhibit, just general awareness around where you are recovery wise. Give you a chance to just kind of, almost do like a body scan, but not in a meditation. But you got to start with the basics. If you don't have sleep down, and that means 7 hours a night at minimum, Theragun's not probably going to be the thing that helps kind of like bridge that gap. If you're not eating well, again, Theragun's probably not going to be the thing that's going to help bridge that gap. However, like anything, if you're sore, if your back hurts, using the gun lightly can be really helpful. I think, at least for me, I like it. I like, I respond well to that, that kind of stuff. But it's really possible that that's entirely just like placebo. That's just like mental. That's just like my perspective on it. There are plenty of people who don't use Theraguns and recover really well. There are plenty of people who don't, use a foam roller and recover well. There are plenty of people who do not and never have gone to a cryo chamber.
Okay, so there is zero evidence that cryo chambers
any
work.
of these things.
There is limited evidence that percussive guns work, but there is zero evidence that cryo things work.
What's that
So-
great recovery book that we've listened to
Oh,
like at least twice on audio now?
Good to Go by Christia Schwanden is an incredible book. It's mostly about the science of recovery, but she actually kind of uses recovery as a lens to examine the pitfalls of doing sports science generally and looking at limited studies and inadvertently overbroad applications. And it's, I think it's one of the best books, like science books generally. Like it's up there with like Alex Hutchinson's writing. She's totally brilliant. She used to write for Runner's World and Outside, and Scientific American. She lives in Colorado. She was an elite cross country skier. But at the end of the day, if you feel persistently sore and you're trying to treat that with a massage gun instead of investigating potential nutrient or macro deficiencies in your diet, or you're only getting 7 hours of sleep, like you're putting a Band-Aid on a serious problem. And I think that is where I would be like we have a massage gun basically just because I was sent one for free for work. If someone gave me a $500 like Visa gift card, I would likely not use it for a massage gun. I would use it for like tofu and melatonin.
Yeah, I think an example kind of from my own training is that, over the last probably 3 months and quite a bit last summer, I've been dealing with an issue in my right kind of like upper glute med area and my hip down into my IT band. And the Theragun, you can put it on your sore muscles and the tight spots of your body and hammer away. And I think, at first I thought that was working. But you can, I think, develop a false sense of what is actually happening. Nothing will replace going to a PT. Something that I wish I had started doing way sooner last summer was seeing my PT regularly to get dry needling done, because that actually is proven to be very effective in areas that have a lot of tension that can't be released. The Theragun isn't going to get in there and do that for you. But I found that tool was really successful for me in dealing with some of these overarching areas of tightness and overuse that develop when you're running a lot. If you have an issue that occurs for 3 days or more, that's a pattern. That means you need to call a PT. That doesn't mean you need to sit there with your Theragun and go over and over and over on your calf, over and over on your hamstring. In fact, I would recommend strongly against pushing in to something that you don't know what's going on there. You don't know what the problem is necessarily. You haven't gotten an expert opinion on it or any expert advice. And again, like right before race day, don't go pressing in on stuff. Don't go provoking things. It's going to just possibly make those areas sore the next time. You can overuse the Theragun. I've seen this with plenty of my athletes who have just been like, oh, my quads were so sore. So I went ham with my Theragun on the highest volume. And then the next day they are twice as sore. And anybody who knows who's gotten like a really good sports massage knows you can be much more sore the day after that massage than you were the day before because of all of the pressure and the moving around of the fascia and things like that. So, use all these things kind of in the way that they're designed. They are like little extras that you get to do. They don't take away from, your responsibility as an athlete to take care of yourself through eating well, sleeping well, seeing a PT when patterns develop. And man, there's people on the call right now who have benefited lately from seeing a PT. And I've seen a difference in their running because they've gone to the experts. The experts have made an evaluation, an in-person evaluation, not through a training log, an in-person evaluation around specifically what's going on with their body and the root causes that may be leading to some of overcompensation or areas that are just generally always sore, or understanding where a weakness lies, and then really working on a daily basis to, improve those areas. And that can be really, really vital. It's something that I do on a weekly basis as an athlete. Many other athletes on the team do. And so I would recommend guys like, and I know sometimes there can be like a financial burden with going to see a PT. We don't have insurance for the PT. Like I've tried, it isn't working.
You have to get referred by a doctor.
But
you can't just go in because your glute is sore, unfortunately.
But I would recommend for athletes as like kind of an insurance policy is like every month, like save $20 and put it in like
an
that,
HSA.
like just like an account where it's like your insurance policy account. $20 over time every month, and you've got a couple $100 in there after a few months. And then use that to go, get a maintenance appointment done with your PT, or have that there in case you need to go get an evaluation. Because waiting on that kind of stuff can just delay all sorts of progress and make these issues worse.
Yeah, I would also say, again, we're not doctors at any point. But my general recommendation is the first sign that you think something might really be wrong, don't wait to see if it resolves after like a week and then call your PT. Because I have so many folks that like something will feel pretty wrong. They'll see if it'll fix itself over a week and then it doesn't. And then they call their PT and then there's a 2-week wait. And then that's not a great scenario to be in. It's always better you rarely regret seeing the doctor too soon.
Yeah, I would be curious what Drew and Kristen think in their coaching, but I think the 3-day rule is really like, that's kind of like my hard rule. Like if you can't rest for 3 days in a row and that doesn't bring relief, or start to create improvement,
if
noticeable
it markedly
improvement,
better,
then you need to seek expert help.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I fully believe in the 3-day rule. And as someone who Chloe. I've had athletes who are like, people just don't want to take time off, but taking 3 days off is you're not going to lose fitness. You're not going to lose everything that you've built up until that point. So just take the 3 days off, take a few deep breaths, cue up Ted Lasso and watch all the episodes on repeat. It's going to be okay. It's just 3 days.
Yeah. If it is challenging for you to take that many days off, I think that is something that's worth investigating with a mental health professional and making sure that you have a robust tool set for coping with the stress of life that isn't wholly reliant on athletic pursuits. And it's always better to take 3 days off than like a month off later.
Yeah. And also use it as an opportunity. I remember when I first got into like being a coached athlete, and I held my training very close to my chest, and it was something that I was spending a lot of time on. So I identified with it quite a bit differently than I do now. And so like if I needed to take time off of running for a niggle or something that was bothering me, it was difficult mentally, because you're not able to do that thing, that you're not able to have that expression of yourself. You're not able to go out there and do that thing that like makes you feel like you. But I kind of feel like you can reframe these things and make them into an opportunity, especially when you develop the awareness around like, okay, maybe it's a little unbalanced if I only identify with the athletic side of myself. Like if that's all that I am and these goals are all that I am, that might potentially lead to some really challenging mental health situations down the road. So if you have to take time away for a niggle, it's an opportunity to practice holding that training loosely, to get a little bit better at giving up the training, just to get a little bit better at like exploring other parts of who you are too. If you're, like Zoe said, I fully agree. If you're overly reliant on that side of your identity, I think, running might be the wrong sport for you, because everybody on this call, looking at all of your guys' names and faces, I don't coach all of you, but I coach a lot of you. Everybody here has had a niggle. Everybody here has probably had to take a day off because something hasn't felt good. And that's unfortunately the inherent part about being a runner. I mean, it's just
It's an
so
impact
many
sport.
impact forces on your body. We can't mitigate it all.
Yeah.
We do our absolute best.
But gravity's still out there doing its
Gravity.
thing.
Darn gravity.
Running would be so great without all the gravity.
Downhills would be weird without gravity.
Yeah, I will say too that like I've known people, and I think I was this person at one point where, you know, if you got injured, your whole world would just kind of like collapse around you because that's all you had. Don't be that person. Like, you know, focus on like read a book. What kind of books do you read? What kind of music do you like? What like, you know, go look at mushrooms or bugs or do something super weird and interesting, because I think that we get so wrapped up in our training that we kind of forget what else there is. So use it as an opportunity to figure out what else and who else you can be.
And maybe don't wait till you're injured to do all of that, like identity questioning, soul searching. Because when you're like already at the bottom of a dark hole, that's a challenging time to be like, oh my God, how do I human?
Yeah.
You know, there's never a wrong time to investigate other outlets for mental self-care. There's never a wrong time to double down on other aspects of your identity. There's never a wrong time to re-solidify non-athletic relationships.
Drew, do you want the final word on this? We didn't hear from you, and
Yeah, no, I was going to say taking those extra days of rest is important. And my athletes that have had to do that, one of the main concerns is they're worried about the schedule, like after those extra few days of rest, and how they kind of get back into it. Are they ruining the week? Are they ruining the month? Like what's going on? And just want everyone to know that what we do for you guys is we write custom plans. And so the idea is we take into account that extra rest, we change things up, and you will never, never, never have like a ruined schedule or a ruined week or whatever it is. You performing at your best and training at your best is obviously the utmost priority. And so the everything written, if we end up taking like a impromptu 3-day rest break, everything written after that is it's mute. It doesn't matter. We're going to rewrite the schedule. You're going to be right on target for everything you're wanting to do. So do not worry about it. Also during those rest days, obviously I like to remind people all the time, you're not just not doing anything. You are actively engaged in the recovery process. To kind of bring it back to the original question, you are engaged in healthy sleeping habits. You're engaged in healthy eating habits. Anything you do mentally and emotionally to get you prepared for your next run, it's important. You have to do it. So don't think like, oh, well, coach prescribed me an extra couple of days of rest so I can make sure my shin splint goes away without turning into a stress reaction or a stress fracture. So you're literally not sitting on the couch for 3 days. Like stretch, drink water, make sure your electrolyte balance is like on par, like all those things to make sure that you're all good to go for your next run day.
Love all of that.
Heck yeah, Drew. Thank you. And I love, you're always talking about preparation and all those little things that you can do kind of between the runs. And yeah, again, it kind of leads me back to thinking like, yeah, the Theragun is great, but some of those bigger picture things might be more valuable. I would say that they are. And what you do kind of outside of your actual workout, that stuff does matter. So consider that.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on to another question. Yeah, I like this
Way
question.
to take a warm up and always make it last for half the
We're so
session.
good. We're so good at
We're
that.
like, let's pick an easy one and then talk
What's our
for
topic?
40 minutes about it.
It's perfect. That
Our
way
hot
we-
dog sandwiches, here's a 40-minute answer.
All right, here's a good question that will also provoke a long answer. If you're in Colorado, running up and down is inevitable. How do you approach downhill running? Do you treat it as recovery, easy pace, or do you use it to make up time? Do you find downhill running mentally exhausting due to the focus it requires? Also, does downhill running help in any way with improving aerobic base? How can we improve technical downhill running? Wow, this is
that's a suite of questions.
Full question here. Thank you, author. Who would like to get started? maybe we could break this up. Zoe, how do you approach downhill running?
So your run should be a consistent effort level. Like the downhills aren't breaks, but it's also not a chance to be like free speed, balls out. You should be running at the same effort level the whole run. So like, the same way that you don't take a break on the uphill, you wouldn't take a break on the downhill. The same way you don't always charge the uphills, you don't usually want to charge the downhills. The caveat to that being 2 to 4 weeks before a big race with lots of descending, you'll want to take, and I will cue athletes in their long runs and workouts to take the downhills with intention or like a boss, because you do want to stimulate additional muscle breakdown to reinforce those eccentric descending muscles against the rigors of what they'll encounter in the race. So sometimes you do want to practice going downhill a little bit harder than purely easy, but again, like we're aiming typically during runs for a consistent effort level. So, we don't want to be like tiptoeing down the hills. We also don't want to be like, Solomon TV bombing down the hills every time either. Like it's not Mount Marathon.
Why
Just be cool.
Why don't we want to hammer the downhills every time?
Yeah, because that would incur a counterproductive amount of eccentric muscle breakdown. And again, like we're aiming for 80 to 85 to 90% of our overall volume to be easy and aerobic. So if you inadvertently turn every downhill into like a Strava segment sleigh, then you're going to potentially be getting outside of a physiological zone that is helpful for your training. And it's just really hard on the body. It's additional impact.
Right.
That's why we do uphill strides, and you never see us be like 30 seconds downhill hard.
I feel like
bones.
Yeah, Kristen, maybe you can kind of get into a little bit about maybe like the focus and the mental side of downhill running, and whether or not, do you find that athletes find that to be exhausting? Do you find that to be exhausting?
Not so much, unless it's very technical, then you kind of have to like be very aware of where your foot is being placed. If you're running over super rocky, super rooty terrain on the downhill, it's a little different. And I think in those scenarios, you take shorter, quicker steps. I've always been told that shorter, quicker steps on any downhill will actually save your quads for later in the race. You're not just going to completely blow out your quads all in that one downhill. And, going all out on every downhill will likely result, I guess, in my experience, it will likely result in stress reactions, stress fractures. You're putting so much more pressure and weight going into the pounding in your legs. Had a lot of teammates in college and cross country, just especially on the men's team, like just hammer the downhills. And, the next week they'd be on crutches or in a boot or something silly. So I just, take it easy. It should be all relative. Obviously, unless you're in a race, then, go do your thing. But in normal training runs, I would say absolutely not. You should not be hammering these things. And
if you feel like you're getting mentally exhausted, you might be focusing too much. Like if your be all end all is to avoid falling, this is maybe not the sport for you. If you never fall trail running, you're not trail running to your potential. I'm not saying you need to go out and fall every time. And I'm not saying I want you to get injured, like it's not go fast, die trying. But if you approach every downhill and think like, oh my God, I don't want to trip, like that can be exhausting, and you are clinging too tightly to staying upright.
Yeah, Drew, I'm curious your thoughts on this, especially, marathon running courses are not flat, as Zoe and I continue to learn as we get more into road running and follow those races. But I'm just, like, what are your thoughts on whether you can really use downhill running to improve aerobic base? Like, are there fitness gains to be made from downhill running, in your opinion?
I believe if we're going to tailor this to the marathon, I believe it's important to practice both uphill and downhill running. And I'm not saying like go balls to the wall on some downhill repeats. That's kind of stupid. But when it comes to practicing smooth inclines and smooth declines, when it pertains to a specific pace, you have to practice that. I understand when you switch over to trail running, like Zoe said, it's absolutely correct. Your effort level is kind of what you have to go on. So keeping the same effort on uphills and downhills makes sense, but your pace fluctuates when you do that for obvious reasons. When it comes to marathoning or anything below, people typically have time-specific goals. All of us do. And so having a time-specific goal, obviously, it makes a lot of sense to, and if there's an uphill, your effort increases because you're keeping that same pace, and on downhills, your effort maybe slightly decreases. And then when people start to get into, well, I lost 10 seconds in that mile because of this uphill, so the next mile, I know there's a downhill, I'm going to make up 10 seconds. That's when people start to get in trouble with the marathon, because you start to see massive fluctuations in pace as you start to feel shittier into the run, and it blows you up and it's not safe. And so trying to get dialed into what does it feel to run 8-minute pace downhill versus 8-minute pace uphill, and kind of practice that. So in a way, there is some, I guess, are ways to practice or needing to practice building or improving aerobic base as it pertains to that specific race. But I know that, if you're running longer, like Zoe said, default to Zoe's advice, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, and to be really clear, because of gravity, you're not going to get as much aerobic benefit from running downhill. It's much aerobically easier to run downhill because you have all of gravity with you. It is much harder aerobically to run uphill because there's more resistance when you're going up. So again, when you're thinking about training methodology, there's a reason why we never have athletes do a
10 by 1 minute downhill.
A tempo run downhill. Tempo is always on
Take
flat or rolling terrain, or an uphill. Even for some of my more advanced athletes, we'll do tempos uphill for long periods of time. Again, maybe a 2% downhill grade on really fast 1 to 3 minute intervals for athletes who are living at like 8,000 feet or above can be beneficial to helping to elicit some extra speed and turnover, because you're just going to be slower when you're running higher up. But it's almost never are you going to see prescribed downhills. However, it is important, like Zoe mentioned, to get the eccentric loading in preparation for, a race with a lot of descending. What is a lot of descending? That really depends on you and your athletic background. I've had athletes think 1,000 feet for a 50K is a lot of descending. And some people think 14,000 feet for a 50K is a lot of descending. There are really various different elevation profiles out there. The best way to approach this, and the way that I like my athletes to approach it, is to always take your downhills around what you would want to do on race day, especially in your long runs. If you're not practicing that similar race level effort, you can't expect your legs to be ready on race day if you want to go faster on the downhill. So you've really got to practice that stuff. And again, like what Zoe said is like very specifically, if you're not 2 to 4 weeks before your event, you really want to like be getting into that zone. If you're a more advanced athlete and your legs are stronger, you're used to that eccentric load, you have a little bit more leeway. But you have to remember, and I think this is something that I'm particularly remembering some moments in my own training, when you're not running as much downhill, and then you go out and do a long run with a lot of downhilling and you charge, your legs are going to be much more sore the next day. And it's going to be harder for you to execute a quality run the day after as a result of that. So if you haven't been doing it frequently, gradually introduce it. And I usually tell athletes like either to run the downhills with intention or to just run them like with some flow. So again, when we talk about flow, it should be fun. You should be leaning down the hill, like Kristen said, like making extra steps. It feels like a dance going down the mountain, more than it feels like running. Like you're making a lot of quick steps.
The way I like to phrase it to my athletes is like, you run the downhills, don't let the downhills run you.
Yeah. And so like, as long as your legs are feeling good, there's really no limit to how fast you can run the downhill. And that's because aerobically, it doesn't do anything for you. You just have to practice that technique if you really want to be good at that in a race. And we've written about downhill running. We've talked about the specific techniques in previous calls, so you guys can look that up. But yeah, I think there is a really important piece of that in your training. And so try not to go into your race out having practiced a bit of that. Your quads will be sorry midway through that long race or that long run if you haven't done it. And again, I would really recommend to all of you guys that on your long runs, you consider, trying to like each week, just get a little bit faster on that downhill. You don't have to force it. Don't force it. Just let it, happen. Work on the turnover and all the training that you do, the strides, the hills, that helps to increase turnover and improve your footwork. And that does over time translate to better downhill running. And
to speak to Jason's point, we had touched on it sooner. There are some benefits to doing, again, strides or intervals on a much, like you would never want to go down the same hill that you go up for hill training. But if there's like a slight, 2-3% downhill incline, doing speed work on a net downhill can help with that neuromuscular component of running and the biomechanical component of running. Like if you struggle with turnover, doing your speed work slightly downhill can really help rev up that turnover. And again, that was something that we did a lot more when we lived in Aspen, just because there are going to be essentially air limits on the speed that we're like, someone that only trains at altitude is going to be really limited on the amount of speed that they're able to develop. That's why you see all the pro runners who live in Flagstaff go do boot camps in like Florida, is because you're not going to be able to develop the same speed living at altitude as you would training at sea level.
There's just not enough oxygen.
Not enough oxygen. So you're not going to be able to get to access your best top end. But downhill is kind of a cheap way of cheating that.
And I think, also in terms of those neurological adaptations, you don't necessarily need to force that via a workout, a specific downhill running workout. I mean, that can really happen on any run during the week, on trails or not. And, again, don't overemphasize it. Try to just be flowy on those downhills. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, great. We really talked a lot about that. Let's, I think this is kind of within the same, we're going to really get some good questions today. Should we treat weekend runs as fun runs or run with a training mindset? Let's hear from Kristen or Drew first on this. Hold up. Maybe Drew. I feel like we have.
I know Zoe's chomping at the bit. Obviously, it depends on your schedule and what your purpose is. I mean, I don't like for every single weekend run, every single long run to be like a very like specific, difficult, like say whatever you want to say, but you got to throw some fun in there. Like have a weekend where you go on an adventure run and forget about distance, go for time, like do whatever. But I think that there needs to be balance, if you will, and your training schedule should reflect that. But Kristen.
Nice. Thank you, Drew.
Yes, I love that, Drew. And I think too, like, this is such a hard, easy question to answer because it absolutely depends. And if you're not having fun, what are you doing? Like there's that. But then there's also like, it depends where you are in your training block. And I think a lot of times you can do a lot of like psychological damage if you're taking everything so seriously all the time. Like that's going to lead to burnout. That's going to lead to these like crazy expectations of grandeur that just like might not happen. And if that's the case, then I think it might be worth talking to a therapist about, or like reaching out to your coach and like really having that like hard conversation. But I think it depends on the athlete. I know a lot of times if I'm in a serious training block, a lot of my vert comes on the weekends, a lot of race simulations happen on the weekends. So finding terrain that is similar to the race you're about to do happens on the weekends, just because you've got more time, you have more flexibility, where you're not worrying about work and travel and things like that. So I'm interested to see what Zoe and TJ have to say about this, because I think it absolutely depends on where you're at and the athlete. So
yeah, I think both of you guys have some really great and valuable information there. My take on this is that your goals should be a facilitating mechanism for you to have fun and train the way that you want to train. If your goal isn't in line with the way that you want to spend your long runs and your weekends, that there's an issue there. So if you're out doing a long adventure run, if you're out doing a really long adventure run, or if your race is going to be a long mountain race, we'll take Grand Traverse or Telluride Mountain Run as examples of what we've done lately or athletes are doing this weekend. Those are really involved runs. You spend a lot of time out. You're in technical terrain. There's a lot of downhill. There's a lot of uphill. If that isn't something that interests you, outside of the race, that's an issue, because you need to practice in that kind of terrain within the 8 to 12 weeks leading up to that race to be really prepared. That's exactly what it takes to get to own your training and to really get prepared. So again, if there is a disconnect between the kind of runs you want to do in training and your goal is probably not the correct goal for you. And it needs to be reevaluated, because your goals facilitate the way you want to live your life. They facilitate how you want to spend your weekends. They should facilitate a lot of fun and, a lot of opportunity to experience joy and things like that. And when you do that, you don't have to have a specific training mindset every single time. You can be looser on some runs. Some runs, you might want to, you're pushing that easy, moderate, closer to race effort. You're making it a dress rehearsal. You're fueling like a boss out there and all that stuff. And some runs, maybe they're a little slower. They're a little more adventurous. You're out with your partner or, friends, whatever it is. But again, if that day isn't similar to the race you have coming up, that can be an issue on race day, because you haven't done your homework, you haven't put the time in. And now I know that with some people, it's, you have these mountain goals, but you live in a city, or you're traveling to a race that's many states away, and you don't have the opportunity all the time to do that kind of training, even though you might want to. And so, with that said, I think that there are some differences there. And what I normally like to have my athletes do is for them to, a few times in that training block, drive somewhere where they can really take the time to get that adventure in, even if it's just once, if that's all you can do, to just make the effort to take a drive, to take a weekend, to go somewhere so you can get on those similar trails, because the training has to be fun. If you hate running on the roads, but that's all you can do all year round to get ready for your Grand Traverse or your run, your big mountain run in Colorado, but you live on the East Coast, that's going to be really tough. That could lead to burnout. So you have to take, the reins, you have to take control of the situation a little bit. And if you have the opportunity, go out and seek those kind of fun adventures, because without that, the training becomes really just training. It can become a little bit stale and boring. Zoe.
Yeah, I think I take issue with seeing things as either or. I think every weekend run should be both. You know, if you're not having fun, that's a problem. But if you have a hard time seeing anything, like serious training should be fun. There's nothing more fun than me than trying to be good at stuff. Like that is fun for me. And that is why I get good at stuff, is because I don't put things into buckets of like, this is serious and productive, and this is fun and just for enjoyment. Like I enjoy the process of like really trying to be good at stuff, and I enjoy taking things seriously. But when you see me race, one of the reasons I think I'm a really good competitor is because like when I'm having fun out there, I'm pretty hard to beat, because like you can't keep me down because I'm having like the most fun and I'm not taking it so seriously that I get tunnel vision and I'm unable to work through challenges and compete as my full self. So I think I would just take issue with the like, oh, is this run serious or is it is this run serious and productive, or is it fun and not that productive? Like, if you are constantly sorting things into like, oh, this brings me joy, or this gets me closer to my race goals, setting up that dichotomy, I think is what leads people to burnout. Because I see so many people be like, wow, workouts are really hard for me because they take away from my ability to just like be free in the mountains. And like, if that's your approach, I think it's going to be really hard for you to reach your potential, because you're kind of like, that dichotomy doesn't just exist. You made that up. You're what you're doing. So if you are telling yourself a story of like anything that is structured and training feels like training, like anything that falls into that category isn't going to be fun, then you're really going to struggle at getting better, I think. So if you can start to reorient your thinking towards like training is fun, working hard is fun, getting better is fun, being serious is fun, you're going to take this a lot further.
Man,
So
I think you just nailed it, because we have seen this so many times recently, you, me, Kristen, and Drew, with some athletes where they have this disconnect with the structure. And without structure, it's very difficult to improve. That's the honest truth. You need to have a methodology, and you need to do
things on purpose.
Yeah, you need to have purpose behind what you're doing. You can't just go out there and just try a little of this, sprinkle a little of that. Because without that, what is it? Maybe
1% of us can train like Anton and just go out there and drink a thimble of, spring water and go on a 40-mile run and then come in second at Leadville. But 99% of us do need to do things on purpose consistently for years and years and years. And if that's not fun for you, then you are going to struggle for years and years and years, and you are not going to reach your potential. But the thing is that like, things aren't just innately fun. Like you tell yourself a story about what is fun. So make the things that are productive for you fun.
I was
like
just thinking,
strides are fun. Hill intervals are fun.
Maybe.
I mean, not 100% of the time, but if every time you see prescribed speed work or a hill interval or a tempo on your training plan, anytime you put things in like, oh, anytime Zoe's telling me to do something, I'm not, that's not fun, then like you're really holding yourself back. I think like so that too. Stuff should be fun. Allowing yourself to seek your potential is the most fun thing there is, right? Like it's not a world where, there's loose training mountain runs and then there's like soul sucking interval workouts. Like interval workouts are fun in a totally different way. And if you never do those interval workouts, then it's going to be a lot less fun when you do have like long, less structured weekend romps in the mountains.
Yeah. And, it really just brings to mind, like, for me, like the training for Telluride, over the last few years, like really preparing for that, and like how fun it is to focus on a goal and to go out on every long run and have an intention.
Yeah.
And all like, of that. And like, if those are the things that like, that's the kind of stuff that brings me joy. Cause I like to do that and I love to train.
And like for us, I think our ideal like fun Saturday is eating a donut and then going on a 16 to 20 mile run in the mountains. Therefore, we chose a race that facilitated a lot of weekends of eating donuts and going on 16 to 24 mile mountain runs.
Yeah.
Like that is why it was a good goal for us, not necessarily because we wanted to do the hardest race and whatever. Like it is a goal that set us up to have a lot of fun in training and to make the training not feel like work. If the training always feels like work, then you need to reorient your relationship to your training and your goals.
Well said. You nailed it. Yeah. Well, cool. I feel like
Donuts,
we,
great fuel.
yeah. We got a couple comments here. Let's check it out.
Some people have a longer athletic history based more towards endurance or more towards speed and strength. Those things might feel more fun, but balancing helps enjoy it. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm a slow twitch athlete. So like spending 8 hours in the mountains is like zero issue for me, but it has been a bit of a challenge to, develop my speed in training. And I think that, again, like focusing on your weaknesses is fun. Like bringing your ceiling up is very fun. It's hard, I think if you just like struggle with if structure feels like a weight on you, or if training, I think that you just need to investigate why you're putting that pressure rather than like embracing the stress on yourself.
Yeah. I mean, gosh.
It's something we see a lot, particularly with athletes who like us do love the mountains, right? Like you and I love long days in the mountains. However, what I love even more than frolicking is being really good at frolicking and getting better at it.
And taking a mastery approach where you're willing to invest years of your time into getting better and really cultivating a passion, really cultivating whatever your talents are, really cultivating that into this well-rounded athlete. And I think that is something that, is challenging as a coach when you see athletes who put up barriers to their own progress because they don't want to engage in the kind of work that elicits growth. And that, that it's interesting. I think it's an interesting dive into psychology, at least for me. It's, why do people decide to make these choices? Where is the disconnect?
To protect themselves from getting vulnerable in training. If you put up a barrier that is going to prevent you from having to actually confront your potential, then you're insulating yourself from the vulnerability of seeking out that potential. I think that's why people do it. I think that's why people are like, oh, I don't do well with structured training. I just have to be out there embracing my mountain spirit. And I'm like, that's so cool. Love that. Same. However, you're putting up an arbitrary barrier between yourself and your potential.
Yeah, I think that one, you could be correct, but it's also interesting to work with each individual athlete to try to help them to get to a place where they can actually approach the workouts from a place where this is hard. This helps me grow. This helps to facilitate me doing what I love in a better way, where I'm more capable, more confident, where I can start to dream bigger and those bigger dreams become more of a reality. And it's hard when you want to get vulnerable and like decide to do a race that's like outside of your comfort zone. And then your coach gives you the 10 weeks of training, boom, here you go. Here's how we're going to do it. And you're like, whoa, no, like that's way too crazy. I can't do all this structured work, which is a reaction that, we've all gotten, you, me, Kristen, Drew have gotten from athletes. And it's, here's what it takes to do what you want to do and to, maybe start to get to like feel what it's like to be close to your potential out there. And it can be, those barriers come up, because it's hard to get vulnerable and do a workout. Workouts, they are as awesome as they are to be, to finish them and to complete them. They're very hard in the moment. They force a lot of inner dialogue to come up. They ask people to, manufacture resilience and grit and to go places that they thought that they couldn't go. And it's, in doing that work, you prepare yourself both physically and mentally for the race. As a coach, I have a hard time when an athlete doesn't want to engage in that because, those are the behaviors that their goal demands in my mind. And so, you get a lot of athletes who experiment with, I'll do 100, but they kind of off the couch it, or they get a plan off the internet that doesn't take into account any of their, running background, their individual history, their stress, their workload, nothing like that. And they maybe have success or limited success, or they eke something out, or they DNF, and all those things. That's not what Microcosm is about at all. We are about helping you guys grow so that you're not eking things out, that you're expressing the fullness of your passion, your love for the sport, your drive to improve over time. So you can actually see who you are, and use running as a vehicle to do that. And I think, gosh, that it's hard when people put those barriers up. I think that's more nuanced and complicated than you described, but also on the surface, it is so much of what you describe. It's hard to be vulnerable. And it's hard to just say, I want to do this thing well, and, be damned the failure. Like, I might screw this up. I think about it. I thought that about that a lot during my race. All of the, I've had way more failures than success in running. And, it's your choice what you do when you set a big goal and how you respond when you fall short of your own expectations in performance. And that, being able to get back up and swing again and again and again, even if you've struck out, is like the name of the game in running. And really anything you do in life, like you adopt that kind of mindset. Like, I messed this up. All right, opportunity. I'm going to get back up, take what I learned, and move forward with it.
Yeah. You should be having fun every day, is what I'm saying.
I mean, gosh, we had the burnout call lately, recently, 2 weeks ago. And I think we all know that sometimes the running and the training feels like work. It definitely does for me. But again, we talked about that long run recently. Like, if you feeling like that on the weekend, that long run, that's like your single highest stress concentration volume run of the week.
Yeah.
Like, that run should almost all the time, you start it super easy. You try to finish feeling good. Like, you go to places that interest you, and that allow you to that set the setting or the environment for having fun. And that makes the training much more worthwhile.
That's why we call it an adventure day in the logs, or we do usually.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Like, having that adventure is huge, and it doesn't have to be
like bagging a peak. It could be like, I end at Starbucks and get a sick cafe.
Yeah. And that's fun about winter running, is really mixing up those routes.
Yeah. I feel like our adventures become a lot more tater tot related.
They certainly are. Yeah. Or donut related.
Very donut related. Donuts are year round.
Yeah. Well, cool. We're up for time, but I hope to see some of you guys at the group run on Sunday. In
Have
Boulder.
fun this weekend, whatever you do.
Yeah.
Make your run fun. Yeah. Don't let it be fun. Make it fun.
It's your choice. Have a good weekend. Bye.